It's Curry off the screen, fakes, fires, he just stuck it. Timeout.
Steph Curry is 37 years old, and he scored 37 points last night, including 15 of his team's final 19 points. The NBA play-in games are underway, and last night's game between Golden State and Memphis was the best and the most intense NBA game played since last year's playoffs. Good morning, everybody. Some Nats talk on the show. They won last night in Pittsburgh 3-0. Andrew Golden from the Washington Post will join us at 11 a.m. Chris Miller, the play-by-play voice of the Wizards. I was thinking about this. I don't think we had Chris on the entire regular season. Now that it's over, we'll get a recap of it, and we can talk some NBA playoffs with Chris at noon. Tune in to our live stream of this show now. The Team 980's YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Do that for me. All right, go to the Team 980's YouTube page, open the app, type in Team 980, and hit subscribe. The show is live from 10 to 1. We are streaming it. Craig Hoffman is live from 4 to 7. Don't forget to hit the like button, like this stream, and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. So bear with me, because this is an annual tradition unlike any other. My annual suggestion to those of you who love sports but don't love the NBA and don't watch the NBA, this is my annual suggestion to give the NBA playoffs a chance. Last night's game was technically a play-in game into the postseason, but it was, for all intents and purposes, a postseason game, post-regular season game. You know, if you don't know how the play-in thing works in the NBA, a few years ago, they went to 1 through 6 qualifies for the playoffs, 7 through 10 plays in to the postseason. Last night, we got 7 versus 8. The winner becomes the 7 seed. The loser plays the winner of tonight's 9-10 game for a chance to become the 8 seed. If you didn't follow that, I'm sorry, but basically the last 2 spots, because there are 8 in each conference that qualify for the playoffs, the last 2 spots are determined over a 3-night period in what the NBA calls its postseason play-in games. So last night's game was technically a play-in game, but the difference between the NBA regular season and the NBA postseason is without question, in my opinion, the largest gap, the largest difference between the regular season of a sport that we love, football, baseball, hockey, basketball, and the postseason of that sport. There's no larger gap in what the product's output is. It's night and day. It is chocolate and vanilla. Whatever, idiom expressing opposites you want to use. The NBA in the playoffs is completely different as a product than the league's regular season product. The regular season product is low energy, less competitive. And unless it's like a high-profile spot like Christmas Day or that in-season tournament, which actually has generated some passion among players, everything else, there's no urgency, and winning versus losing is secondary. It's an afterthought in any game played between October and the early to middle portion of April before we get to this time of year. The devotion to doing whatever it takes to win the game in the playoffs is the biggest difference. The commitment from what I would call the best athletes on the planet. I believe basketball players are the best athletes on the planet. Playing the game, and this is something that bothers older fans, and I'm an older fan, but playing the game at a skill level that has never been matched. I mean, the NBA players, the skill level Like when you watch the NCAA tournament during March and it's like, it's fun and, you get some drama and you get some good basketball. I mean, it's literally like the freshman team, compared to the varsity. It's probably more like 7th and 8th graders compared to the varsity. That's the gap between the NBA skill level and athleticism compared to the college game. It's completely different. It doesn't mean that the college game is any less because there are other things that make the college game great. The pageantry of it, the tradition, the uniforms, the brands in some cases are bigger than most of the NBA brands. Not all of them, obviously the Lakers, Celtics, etc. But the commitment from the best athletes on the planet playing the game, God, Lavero is just screaming if he's listening to this, playing the game at a skill level that has never been matched. Sorry, but the 62 Celtics would lose to any NBA team in 2025 by 50 or more. It's just completely different. Evolution, bigger, faster, stronger, etc. But even the skill level is just so much greater. But the commitment this time of year, and man, was it on display last night in San Francisco. The commitment to giving it their all from start to finish to win is the biggest difference. It's the opposite of what you get in the regular season, in January, in December, in March, in February. Last night's Golden State-Memphis game, and I stayed up for the entirety of it, was spectacular. The intensity from the jump was obvious. Now, we're not going to get a great game like last night every single night. There will be one-sided blowouts. There will be some games where some of you will tweet me and say, yeah, I gave Magic Celtics game 2 a chance, and the Celtics won by 40. Yeah, no thanks. We're going to get those games. The effort will be consistent. It'll be completely different than what you get in the regular season. But there will be plenty of nights over the next 2 months like last night. Ja Morant, star. Okay, he is so good. Forget his everything about what he may or may not be off the court. Last night, he hurt his ankle badly. He'd have been out 2 weeks in the regular season with the injury that he had to his ankle last night. Instead, you got, remember the Isaiah Thomas performance? Game 6, 87 against the Lakers on one ankle. You got Ja Morant coming back into the game, hitting big bucket after big bucket on one ankle down the stretch for Memphis. They were down 20 at one point. They came back and took the lead in the fourth quarter. Playoff Jimmy Butler was in full effect. What is it about Jimmy Butler? Well, it's pretty simple, right? He doesn't, like most of the players in the league, they don't care about the 82 games played from October until last week. He cares now. God, is he good. 38 points last night. He's so high IQ. I mean, this guy, since joining the Warriors, they are 24-7. They have the second best record. Again, playing regular season games, which really you have to ignore. When you evaluate, like as a fan, NBA players, only do it this time of year. Only do it when you know everybody on the floor is giving it their best and that every possession matters. It doesn't, the 82 played during the regular season, they just don't matter in terms of evaluation of players. Sure, there are spectacular moments and there is an evaluation, but the real evaluation, the true evaluation of an NBA player comes when both teams are committed with their best players start to finish, opening tip until final buzzer, to winning the game. It's great. I have friends of mine that just, roll their eyes when I say this, and I know some of you are rolling your eyes right now. The NBA playoffs are top-notch entertainment. The intensity of that game last night was so great. So, about the game last night, this was a 7 versus 8 play-in game. The winner becomes the 7 seed. The loser isn't out. They'll have one more chance on Friday night to play the winner of tonight's 9-10 matchup to gain the 8 seed, meaning they'll be in the actual playoffs and they'll play a best of 7. And now Memphis's best shot is to win on Friday night. Who knows what Ja Morant's health will be for that game. And they'll play the winner of Sacramento-Dallas, which is the 9-10 game tonight. But whomever emerges as the 8 seed will play Oklahoma City in a best of 7. That was the significance of last night, is that the winner of last night's game got the 2 seed, Houston. Now, both teams are inexperienced and younger teams, but the winner of last night's game, especially if it was Golden State as a 7 seed, was actually going to be favored in their first round matchup against the 2 seed. Golden State is a minus 180 favorite as the 7 seed over the 2-seeded, very young and inexperienced Houston Rockets. It's just the second time in 30 years that a 7 seed has been favored over a 2 seed in a series. So the game last night, Golden State won it 121-116. Memphis, with 5.4 seconds left in the game, had the ball and couldn't get it in bounds. A 5-second call. Think about that. Do you think there's any chance a team in the regular season is going to really struggle to get the ball in bounds? No, because the other team doesn't defend as hard as Golden State did. It was a terrible, terrible set for them. They have a Finnish, meaning he's from Finland, head coach in Memphis who took over, mid-season. And they did not drop anything exciting to get the ball in bounds. Golden State got the turnover and hence clinched the game. Because what was really brilliant about this game, for those of you watching, Steph Curry's brilliance down the stretch. 15 of the team's last 19 points in the fourth quarter. Scored 37 at 37 years old. He was, 6 of 13 from behind the arc, 13 of 13 from the free throw line. One of the things for me in watching that game last night, for those of you that were watching it, how about Steph being double teamed on inbounds plays at the end of the game and shaking free to get the ball, get fouled, and go to the line because, of course, he's the greatest free throw shooter of this era. They didn't run a lot to get him open, which always frustrates me, but Steph put on a couple of moves like a slot receiver and got wide open, and they were forced to foul him. He was brilliant. Jimmy Butler, unbelievable in this game. He missed a bunch of free throws, though. That was the one thing. He was 12 of 18 from the free throw line. That dude, over the years in the postseason, has elevated his game to where you have to say, if you're only judging the playoffs, which I think you should do, because that's when you are guaranteed both teams trying to win, giving effort. Jimmy Butler has played in the postseason like a top 5-ish player in the league. If you don't want to go that far, fine, but he's no worse than top 10 in the league. He has taken playing teams, 8 seeds, 7 seeds to NBA Finals on his back in Miami. And the addition of him to Golden State gives them a legitimate chance to get to the NBA Finals out of the West, even though they're a 7 seed. He had 38 points in 40 minutes, 6 assists, 7 rebounds, 3 steals. I can't tell you how many hockey assists he probably ended up with, where he was the playmaker, he read the defense correctly, and made massive, great decisions. He made one bad decision at the end of the game. He gets consistently to the free throw line. He's such a physical player. And, just a great basketball game, start to finish. That's going to be a hell of a series, Golden State and Houston. The West is set up with just unbelievable matchups. Nuggets, Clippers will be great. Lakers, Timberwolves, amazing. The Lakers as a 3 seed, a lot of people think the Lakers are the best team in the West. If we get a second round matchup of Lakers Warriors, that will be must-watch television. Nuggets Clippers should be spectacular. Regardless of who advances out of that series, if they play Oklahoma City in the second round, what a series that will be. The West, I will concede, is much more exciting than the East heading into this. The East has 1-seeded Cleveland, but Boston is the favorite to emerge as the 2 seed and the defending champs. I do think Detroit as a 6 has a legit shot over the Knicks as a 3. And then you get Pacers, Bucks, and we'll see what the Bucks can be because it's been a few years now. I think the Celtics will emerge out of the East. I think legitimately there are 5 teams that could be in the finals out of the West. Oklahoma City, Denver, the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Warriors. I do not think the Rockets are there yet. I don't. Oklahoma City shouldn't be there yet either experience-wise, but they are just so good and so deep. But again, regular season-wise, what does that mean in a best of 7 when they are getting everybody's best swing with no load management and true devotion and commitment to winning night in and night out? We shall see. It'll be great. And then you add to it, especially when the games are on TNT, the TNT crew with Ernie, Kenny, Shaq, and Barkley. They were in rare form last night. When you get that pregame, you get that at halftime, you get that postgame, then you get another game. It's a fun night. I don't know. Maybe watching a really good show is the preference of many of you. But I'm telling you, last night was intense. It was the opposite of what you see in the regular season. You know, you can call me, over the top when it comes to this because I've gotten that every year. But it's like I'm watching last night. I'm texting back and forth with a couple of friends who are watching it. I'm like, you got to wait all year to see this. Like there's really, as a sports consumer, the NBA should just be written off in the regular season, which, by the way, for the most part, it is. And the ratings kind of reflect that. But you got to come back to it this time of year. These athletes, the skill level, it's insane. The shot making that was on display last night. The first game last night was played in the East. And I would agree with anybody that watched that game that Trey Young getting tossed, it almost seemed like, he was right about the way the game had been called. Now, he got tossed and he was incredibly disrespectful to the referee heading out, and he's going to get fined a lot of money for the way that he left. He pulled the ball away from the ref, faked like he was going to throw it back at him, but spun it back and then just left it there. Incredibly disrespectful walking off the floor. Orlando's got a player that's actually 2 players. Paolo Banchero, who played at Duke and came out and was the number one overall in 2022, is legit. I mean, they doubled him consistently. He still ended up, getting 17, 9, 7. He's a force, like a legitimate force. The guy that came off the bench last night and had a massive game was a guy that didn't even average double figures during the regular season. Cole Anthony, Greg Anthony's son, who played at Carolina, came off the bench and in 20 minutes scored 26 points with a level of energy that was insane. His plus minus was plus 32 on the night. I don't think Orlando can beat Boston. And as the 7 seed, they're going to get Boston. I can't imagine that's a long series, but Orlando's capable of playing well. Just the Boston experienced, been there, defending champion. We'll see what they look like when the postseason begins. I will tell you, this coming weekend, when you get 4 games on Saturday and 4 on Sunday, they're all game 1s. I'm not going to sit there and tell you I'm going to watch from 12 until midnight or until 1 in the morning. I probably won't do that, especially if it's a nice day Saturday. But there are a couple of matchups that this weekend you're going to want to watch. You're going to want to watch Clippers-Nuggets game 1. You're going to want to watch T-Wolves-Lakers game 1. Those are on Saturday. On Sunday, we're going to get, the Warriors and the Rockets game 1. Let's see what time that is. I hope it's at night. It is at night. Then we'll see what the Celtics look like. In Oklahoma City, I think I mentioned this on yesterday's show or maybe the day before. They were 68-14 during the regular season. That's impressive, even for the regular season. They had the largest margin of victory in the history of the league in the regular season. Let's see what they look like in the postseason. I'd love to see them play Memphis, but with a healthy Ja Morant, because Desmond Bane can really play. Yeah, that's the matchup. But we might get Dallas, and Anthony Davis in a series like that. By the way, did you see this story yesterday, Max, that Nico Harrison basically doubled down and said he's got no regrets about the Luka trade?
I didn't see that. I saw a tweet that he was meeting with the media where no recording devices were allowed inside. So
oh, really?
Yeah, that was a NBA Central tweet. So, and not a Centel tweet. So I know it wasn't. I didn't get Centelled, but yeah, I believe that was the case. I'm not 100% verified on that, but that was something I did see.
So, quote, "There's no regrets on the trade. Part of my job is to do the best thing for the Mavericks, not only today, but also in the future. And some of the decisions I'm going to make are going to be unpopular. That's my job, and I have to stand by it." He was, asked about when Luka returned and was incredibly emotional, and the fan base was incredibly reciprocal in their emotion for him. And by the way, started to chant, fire Nico. He said, quote, "Well, the beauty of Dallas is it is a passionate fan base. For us to reach our goals, we need that fan base. And to be honest with you, every trade I've made since I've been here has not been regarded as a good trade. And so sometimes it takes time. When I traded for Kyrie, it was met with a lot of skepticism, and it was graded as a terrible trade, and you didn't see it right away. But eventually everybody agreed that that was a great trade. When I traded for Gafford from Washington, again, it was like, oh, he gave up way too much. These guys aren't going to help us. Now that trade, you saw the evidence a lot sooner. So I think a lot of times trades take a little bit of time. But our philosophy, like I said, going forward is defense wins championships, and we're built on defense. And this trade cements us for that. Look, that's, there's been a lot said since the Luka trade coming out of Dallas. Including some of the reports that got out there about his conditioning and even his drinking. There was a lot of discussion about, part of his conditioning is because he drinks too much. That came out. Dallas didn't handle it very well. There is no doubt the comment of defense wins championships and we're about defense is also a shot at Luka, because Luka views guarding people as an optional behavior. And even in the postseason, we saw it last year in the NBA Finals and leading up to the NBA Finals. He's not a good defender at all. I think he's actually capable of playing better defense than he does, but he seems to be more often than not disinterested. And many times it's because he's on the offensive end of the floor still arguing about a non-foul that he thinks was a foul. But here's the thing with what they did with Luka, and this is really about public trust, which is a bit of an overstated term because these teams are mostly privately held. But if you believe in sports teams being part of the public sphere, part of a public sort of trust, you have to take into consideration that, first of all, in Dallas, no offense to the Mavericks, but it is the Cowboys 1, the Cowboys 2, 3, 4. Then we can get into high school football, college football, before we get to the Mavericks. Now, the Mavericks have had success. They were in the NBA championship series last year. They won a championship with a very popular player. and a legend in Dallas in Dirk Nowitzki. And Luka had become that kind of legendary player that had fans, young, middle-aged, and old. They had seen him grown up, and seen him grow up in the franchise, from 18 to 24, 25 years old. And a lot of the business of that organization has to be considered, because you broke the hearts of fans by trading somebody that was so popular, that was a big reason for why there was as much interest in the Mavericks as there was in a football-crazed city and state. So Nico Harrison, I understand GMs, they make these moves and they've got a lot more information than we do. And who knows, maybe ultimately they'll win more than they would have with Luka. And I guess that is kind of the brass tacks bottom line. But in the meantime, he's injured his business seriously. So it better pay off with championships. I was reading something in a sports business story last week, after the Luka return to Dallas with the Lakers. And it essentially made the case that winning a title, even if it comes sooner rather than later, and it's not going to come this year because they had a lot of injuries in the defense of Nico Harrison, Anthony Davis, who basically gets injured if the wind blows too hard. And he goes down with an ouchie and a boo-boo and is out 3 weeks. That should have been taken into consideration when you made the trade too. You may have been trading, a guy that doesn't stay in shape and doesn't play defense, but you got maybe the softest big man in the history of the game that you brought into the fold. Extraordinarily talented. I mean, Anthony Davis is a monster when he plays. When he plays is the key part of that discussion, because nobody goes down harder and for longer for less than that guy does. I mean, it's embarrassing, honestly. But he got hurt, and immediately Kyrie Irving obviously tore his ACL. They've had so many injuries, so this year is not going to work out. But I was reading this thing that essentially said, even if they were to win a championship sooner rather than later, would it pencil out for the organization, business-wise, better than if they had kept Luka and not won a title? And the case was made that it would have, and would have easily, very easily. That's one of those where the owner has to, step in and say, wait a minute. Breaking the hearts of our fans with what could be considered the most shocking trade in the history of sports. And that's where that Luka trade ranks. It's up there. It's way up there on the list of some of the most shocking trades in the history of sports. Can we recover from something like that from a business standpoint, even if we do win? Anyway, I think, I know the general managers have to kind of hold these post-season pressers, but I think it's one of those things where you just say, look, we did what was in the best interest of the organization in the moment, and time will tell. I feel awful that our fan base feels the way it does, but I can't do, what the fans want me to do over and over again, or I'll be sitting with them. That's the line. If I listen to the fans, I'll be sitting with them. But to say no regrets on the trade, maybe a bit too much for right now. But anyway, they play tonight in the 8-9 game. And I'm sure, if they can pull it off and then beat Memphis and get into a series against OKC, and Anthony Davis plays great. I mean, even money, he gets injured tonight and misses much of the game. All right, that's a lot of NBA to start the show. I understand that. So we'll talk some football and bring most of you back for the next segment. But honestly, I say this every year. I'm a big sports fan. Most of you are. You love drama. You love true competition, true intense competition, and the NBA playoffs are that. The NBA regular season is not. It's a terrible product. I love basketball, and the NBA is a very difficult watch from October to before the playoffs begin. But the playoffs are completely different, and they're worth it as far as I'm concerned. So there's my annual suggestion, all right? Not urging, not threatening, just suggesting. Do what you want with it, but it's great, and it's great for 2 months. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app. So we are into that time frame, 8 days before the draft, where if something is going to happen with a player like Trey Hendrickson, it's probably going to happen in the next week. More on that in a moment. I did want to talk quickly about our brief conversation about Jalen Ramsey yesterday, because a lot of you tweeted me, and I saw it before the show. You're just like, absolutely not on Jalen Ramsey. For those of you who missed it, Jalen Ramsey, a seven-time Pro Bowler, three-time All-Pro first-teamer. The Dolphins and Ramsey mutually agreed on looking for a new destination, a new team via a trade. You know, I said yesterday that I think you kick the tires like you find out what the price is. But let me be more clear on this, because this came, I think, at the end of the show yesterday. So let's start with this. Jalen Ramsey has certainly been one of the best cornerbacks of his generation. He just has been. But Miami seems to be heading in a new direction. So should Washington be interested? I don't think so. All right. Let me just be really clear. I don't think they should be, but it's really contingent on this, that Marshawn Lattimore is going to be Marshawn Lattimore next year. And that organizationally, behind closed doors, they believe what they've been saying publicly, which is we have no concern about Marshawn Lattimore. We just think that he was injured. He never got healthy. He was trying to acclimate to a new system, new teammates in short order. You know, it was at the end of the year. And then, oh, by the way, he got one great receiver after another. A.J. Brown twice. What's his face in Atlanta once. Chris Olave. Like down the stretch. Let me just pull up their schedule so I remind myself of who he got matched against. He got down the stretch his former team, Chris Olave, right? He got Drake London. He got A.J. Brown twice. It wasn't easy. But again, back to Jalen Ramsey. For me, it comes down to, are they feeling good about Marshawn Lattimore? If they are, no. And I'll tell you a few reasons why I say no. Number one is this. The draft has corner possibilities. And they brought in for their top 30 visits yesterday. Ben Standig reported they had 20 people in. Apparently took them to Topgolf last night. Remember the Topgolf stuff last year with Jaden Daniels and Jaden's agent, liking certain tweets that were criticizing Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, taking, it was Jaden Daniels, it was Drake May, it was Michael Penix Jr., and I think, was it McCarthy, the other one? Maybe Bo Nix, I forget the quarterbacks that they took to Topgolf. And it was a very kind of unorthodox thing to do. And there were people out there criticizing Adam Peters and Dan Quinn for doing that. Like, what are they doing? And the agent for Jaden Daniels, his name was Ron Butler, criticized it or liked some tweets that were criticizing it. Yeah, it turned out to be a nothing burger. They took him back to Topgolf last night. They thought that it would be interesting and that they would learn something about their prospects by seeing them interact in a social environment. Now, I remember what I said at the time. I said, I get what they're trying to do and kind of, assess socially where they are, how they get along. Are they people that people gravitate towards? Do they have leadership, capabilities, whatever it is. The one thing that I remember saying specifically about Topgolf is that for a superstar athlete, which those quarterbacks were, what if one of them played a lot of golf and one of them didn't? What if one of them is uncomfortable swinging a golf club, has never done it, and it could be almost an embarrassing situation? Now, maybe you'd learn something from seeing them in an embarrassing situation. Maybe handling it in a very self-deprecating way would be a big learn. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Back to Jalen Ramsey for a moment. Max Hairston from Kentucky, the guy that ran a 4.28 and has climbed the boards, was in. Quincy Riley from Louisville was in. Corner is definitely a possibility for Washington at 29 and certainly at 61. So there are corners in the draft, but it's more than that. The price for Jalen Ramsey in terms of the trade value, I don't think you're getting him for any less than a second. And that's only because he's a little bit older, because he does have years left on his contract. But that's the other part of it. It's a very expensive contract moving forward in terms of cap hits. Like, it's $25 million plus in 26 and 27, as in 2026 and 2027. He's had some hamstring issues. That's something that they've dealt with Marshawn Lattimore. And there is something about Ramsey over the years, right? That kind of speaks to he's never really happy in a place. It seems like he's always looking for the next gig. So I think the cost is probably too high. The age, the health, the fit, maybe culturally. And then you've got, the possibility of rookie corners out there. Now, if Lattimore is still a question mark and a concern, or you just think, wow, if we had Ramsey and Lattimore next year with Sanders still in the slot, I mean, we're going for it. We added Tunsil, we added Debo, we added Marshawn at the trade deadline. We are going for it. We're still going to make a move potentially for Trey Hendrickson. More on that in a moment. We're going for it. Again, I'm all for the taking advantage of this window and swinging big, but I would say not so much on Jalen Ramsey for the reasons mentioned. I think you got to get the pass rush figured out at this point. You traded a bunch for Lattimore. You got a guy in Sanders still that you really like. You added a Jonathan Jones. You brought back Noah I. Let's focus on stopping the run and getting a pass rush before we add a corner who's older, who's had some hamstring issues, who never seems to be happy, and who's very expensive. That's what I would say. But I don't know for sure, other than taking them at their word, on their optimistic, level of Marshawn Lattimore becoming Marshawn Lattimore again next year. I did say yesterday on the show that Max and I were talking about it at the end, that it does kind of feel a little bit like a Howie Roseman move. Darius Slay and C.J. Gardner-Johnson are gone. They've got Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean and Keely Ringo as their corners. And Mitchell and DeJean had tremendous rookie seasons. But, man, a Jalen Ramsey, especially coming off a Super Bowl where they've got a lot of leeway to take some chances. And let's not forget, if he's healthy, he's an excellent corner. And by the way, a corner that tackles. All right. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and it just got me thinking about the next 7 days leading up to the day of the draft. Probably would happen before the draft, but some Trey Hendrickson thoughts when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
All right, yesterday, the Commanders hosted 20 or so prospects yesterday in Ashburn, including corners Quincy Riley and Maxwell Hairston. They ran back the famous Topgolf trip. Dan Quinn and Adam Peters said they found it beneficial because players were more relaxed and they could observe how players interacted with one another in a social setting. The Caps last night defeated the Islanders by a score of 3-1. Dylan Strome accounted for all 3 goals to score his first career hat trick as a Washington Capital. The Nats got the win in Pittsburgh last night, 3-0. Jake Irvin gets the shutout win with 7 innings pitched, 6 Ks, and only 3 hits. James Wood also hit this massive 445-foot bomb.
3-2 pitch. Wood, a long drive, straightaway center and deep. Forget about it. This one heading out toward the river. It is long, long gone. It bounces out of PNC Park and down toward the Allegheny River. James Wood's first career leadoff home run. 6 pitches in, the Nationals lead 1-0.
They continue their series tonight at 6:40 on 106.7 The Fan. With the draft just over 1 week away, Cam Ward took to the internet last night streaming Fortnite, where he opened up and named his top 4 wide receivers in the NFL. 1, Calvin Ridley. 2, Jamar Chase. 3, Justin Jefferson. And 4, Treylon Burks. Safe to say he knows where he'll end up to start his NFL career. The NBA play-in continues to roll on. The Magic lifted over the Hawks 120-95. The Warriors beat the Grizzlies in a thriller 121-116. Tonight, the Heat take on the Bulls and the Mavs take on the Kings. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman live from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream, turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
So a week from tomorrow night, Lambeau Field, Green Bay. That's where the draft is this year. That will be an excited fan base for the draft. Deadlines make deals. Not that there is a contract deadline to discuss, but I think there is a trade deadline to discuss. And it is the Trey Hendrickson trade deadline to discuss. So it's now 2 months since Cincinnati and Trey Hendrickson said, all right, you don't want to be here. Go seek a trade partner. Go find somebody that will give us at least a first rounder, if not more, and pay you the roughly $30 million a year that your, league leading sack total of the last 2 years should command, even at your age. And they haven't found a willing partner yet. And so the move back to, well, maybe you'll stay here. We got Jamar Chase and we got T. Higgins signed for the long term. We're able to structure those contracts, which gives us more room here in this year. We're going for it. We don't want to lose our best pass rusher and our best defensive player. We think if everybody stays healthy, we can be a Super Bowl contender in the AFC next year. But they haven't gotten close on a deal, according to reports. So Trey Hendrickson's kind of hanging out there in the wind right now. He's not close, according to reports, to a deal with his own team. And he and his agent haven't found a team willing to either give up a first plus to Cincinnati and pay him $30 million a year, or perhaps neither one of those two things. He's found out that whatever he's worth, it's not what he thought he was worth. Washington has reportedly been, and I believe this to be true, a team that has been interested in Trey Hendrickson. I think they would have really been interested in Myles Garrett had he ever made it to market, and I think there would have been an absolute bidding war for Myles Garrett. I do not consider Trey Hendrickson to be in that same class, although he is a great pass rusher and a really, really good player. But you're going to have to pay him. So to give up a first and third and then pay him a top 3, edge rusher, defensive end salary, you're not giving up a first or third. But what happens in these things is that Washington and other teams say, no, we're not willing to give up a first and a third. Washington, by the way, doesn't have a third rounder. They have a third rounder next year. They have a second rounder now. But whatever the first plus equivalent to a first and third would be, they're not willing to give it up. Other teams haven't been willing to give it up. I would not be surprised if Washington would be okay with the contract extension and what the value for him would be in terms of making sure that you had a player under contract for the next 4 years at a number that he's happy with and that you can deal with from a salary cap standpoint. Now, if something's going to happen between now and the draft, either Hendrickson's going to get a long-term deal signed with Cincinnati, or he's going to get traded. I think we're down in that window between now and, say, probably sometime on Wednesday, probably not the day of the draft. We've seen less and less happen the day of the draft, more and more happen the day or two before the draft. But if something's going to happen trade-wise, it's going to happen before the draft because Cincinnati is going to want the picks in this draft. They're not going to want the deal done afterwards and have picks given to them that start in 2026. I have no idea how this works out. I really thought when Chase and Higgins got wrapped up, I thought there was a really decent chance that Hendrickson would stay in Cincinnati. But that's not what, has happened. And in fact, some of the reporting and some of the comments by Hendrickson in particular have indicated that they've grown further apart. Does Cincinnati really want to deal with a potential holdout situation post-draft and before training camp or before week 1 of the regular season? I think the opportunity of waiting Cincinnati out, which I think teams like Washington and others who are interested in Trey Hendrickson. This has been the plan all along. Unless Cincinnati budged first, they were going to wait Cincinnati out and wait for them to get desperate to make a deal and to lower their price right before the draft. I do think Washington dealing a second and a fourth, or, a second and, next year's third, is in play for Trey Hendrickson between now and next Thursday. I think that's something to totally keep an eye on in terms of, newsmakers out there, the Schefters and the Rappaports of the world. Hopefully somebody local. That would be nice to break that news. But it would not surprise me if between now and a week from today that Trey Hendrickson is traded. And if he is, Washington is interested. Will they be the team that offers the most? Well, at least they're sending him to an NFC team and not an AFC competitor. So there is that advantage. And then you would work on the contract extension right away. I'm wondering what they're waiting for in terms of the Terry McLaurin contract extension. That has to happen before the season starts. Maybe part of it has to do with there's another big contract out there for them to get through. All right, up next, we shift gears and talk about the Nationals, who have actually played very competitively here to start the season. Andrew Golden covers the team for the Washington Post. He'll join us next. All right. Andrew Golden covers the Nats for the Washington Post. The Nats beat the Pirates last night 3-0. James Wood with a leadoff home run to open up the game last night. Jake Irvin, outstanding last night. 7 innings complete, 3 hits, no earned runs, no runs, period. 6 strikeouts and just 1 walk. The Nats are 7-10, a competitive start to their season. Andrew Golden joins us right now at Andrew C. Golden on X on Twitter. So 17 games into it, and it does start to fly by. It's amazing because it seems like it was opening day just yesterday. But I would say, and I'm curious as to whether or not you would agree with me, but this has been a much more competitive team to start the season than maybe some of the experts thought it would be. You say what?
Yeah, I think I expect the Nationals to be a little bit more competitive this year. I think that they have the talent too. It's just a matter of can they string it together. And I think what you saw in the Diamondback series and the Dodgers series is that they can't compete and they do have the talent to keep themselves in the mix, but they do have to do that consistently. As you can see, this weekend in Miami, they lost 2 out of 3 to a team that they beat 11 times out of 13 last year. And so I think it's a matter of just getting that consistency going. But I think they have the talent to compete. It's just a question of how do they stack up in a division that is, pretty stacked with the Phillies, the Mets, and the Braves, who I know have gotten off to a hot start, but, the Braves have a lot of talent as well. So I'm interested to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, so far, part of the story, right, Andrew, is that what we lacked last year, what the Nats lacked last year in offensive power, it's a much better situation so far this year.
Yeah, with James Wood, as you mentioned, is kind of spearheading it with his 6 home runs. But you had Nathaniel Lowe in the order, who was a World Series champion 2 years ago. They added Josh Bell to hit a little bit more power, and then C.J. Abrams. Obviously, C.J. Abrams is a talented guy at the top of the order who has shown he can hit for some power in the past too. And so I think that has been a positive is that they did say this offseason that they wanted to hit more power, and I think that they're seeing that right now. And I think that's obviously what they were hoping for.
6 home runs in 17 games is a pretty good pace for James Wood. What's been the difference for him so far? Because I think his over-under was like 25.5, something like that for the season. He's ahead of that pace. What do you attribute that to?
I think it's just experience in the offseason of preparation. I think obviously he debuted last year right in late June, early July, and I think he had 4 months to kind of get a sense of how big the pitchers are going to pitch him. And I think that obviously was a big adjustment. I mean, last year after the All-Star break, he led the team in homers and RBIs and walks. And so I think you already saw flashes of what he could be last year. I just think he's more comfortable and knows exactly how teams are going to attack him. I think he just has a better sense of it from being up there for 4 months. So I don't necessarily look at him and see that anything has changed or anything is different. I think it's just more experience and, just growing his baseball IQ and understanding of how teams are going to approach him. So
how many home runs do you think he hits after this start?
Well, that's the thing. Like when the season began, I had him at 27, but I mean he's already at 6. So I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I need to up my prediction. Maybe he will get to 30. But one of the things that James always said is that for him, like homers come in bunches, and so I'm gonna stick with my 27. But like everybody always gets off the hot starts, but can they sustain it? But I'm gonna stick with my 27, but I can easily see him hitting 30. And he's as you said, he's on pace to do way more than 30. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, he's got 6 so far for those not paying attention, tied with a bunch of players for second in the league so far in home runs. Who else offensively has kind of carried them and been, either as expected or a surprise so far?
I think, like I mentioned earlier, C.J. Abrams, I know he's on the injured list with a flexor strain. But C.J. has played as advertised so far this year, and I think that he's been pretty impressive. And then a guy who I think has kind of turned some heads is Alex Call. The Nationals ended the year with James Wood in left field, Jacob Young in center, and Dylan Cruz in right. And that was going to be the game plan. And Alex Call is going to be the backup fourth outfielder, but Jacob Young and Dylan Cruz have both kind of struggled early on. And Alex Call has come out and hit the ball really well. He's been hitting the leadoff spot in games where he's played for the most part this year, especially with C.J. Abrams out. And so I've been really impressed with what Alex has done. He showed some of these flashes last year, but then he got hurt and then didn't come back the rest of the year. But he's shown that he can be a good fourth outfielder and also be a valuable starter when he needs to be. So I've been impressed with what I've seen from Alex.
Dylan Cruz, horrendous start. Had a rough, couple of games too here recently. But overall, what are they saying about his slow start to a much anticipated season?
Yeah, my sense is that they're not panicked, but and they like what he's been doing recently. I think the problem, at least in the first couple series, that Dylan wasn't making a lot of contact, and that was obviously alarming. He was striking out a lot, and definitely concerning. I think now he's making better contact. He's just hitting balls right to people, and I think last night was probably one of his better games. He's hitting a lot of line drives at center right field gap, and that's what the Nationals wanted to see out of him. And so I don't think that they're overly concerned. But he's definitely off to a slow start, and definitely is not what the Nationals envisioned. And Dave Martinez keeps saying, like, over the 162 game season, you're going to go through slumps, and so he could get hot next month, and everything will be fine. But I think we still need to see that. And so I think pitchers are pitching him fastballs in, breaking balls away, trying to get him to chase, and it's worked at times. And I think he's just trying to figure out how to make those adjustments. So he's hitting the ball well. The other thing too that I've heard is that is that they want him to maybe move a little bit less. Like his swing has a lot of moving parts, and that can make it hard to adjust to big league pitching. And so I think they're trying to get him to simplify his swing a bit more, so that way he can have more success.
Seems like Davies, fooling around a little bit with the batting order. What do you make of that? James Wood in the leadoff spot last night. Cruz, towards the bottom of the order, and I think during much of the spring, maybe he hit in spots higher up in the order. Or just give me a minute on, what you think Davies fooling around here with the order.
Yeah, I think he's fooling around with it right now because C.J. Abrams is out, right? And I think that I think C.J. that he's always the leadoff hitter, right? And James will be right after him. But I think you want somebody at the top of the lineup who is patient, works counts, and takes pitches. And I think that's what that's the reason for having James Wood at the top of the lineup. And Alex Caller's been there; he's done the same thing. I think Dylan Cruz at the bottom of the lineup is just a reflection of the fact that, like, if you want to win, you want your best guys up top. And Dylan has not hit as well to begin the year. It's possible that could change as the season progresses. And I know in the spring he batted towards the top of the lineup, but I think it's one of those things where you have to earn it, and like he had to hit that well to start the year, and I think it's an opportunity to take some pressure off of him, and hopefully as things get going, maybe he'll move back to the top of the order. But I think it's just a reflection of how he's hitting right now.
Talking to Andrew Golden from the Washington Post, the Nats last night shut out the Pirates on the road 3-0. Jake Irvin was outstanding. 17 games in, Mackenzie Gore's had a couple of outstanding starts. Give me a minute on the starting rotation before we delve into the bullpen issues.
Yeah, I think the starting rotation has been good. I think Mackenzie on that opening day struck out 13, and
yeah.
I want to say that his stats matched up to, I think it was Bob Gibson. Like he and Bob Gibson.
Pretty good company.
But yeah, when you're in the same mix as Bob Gibson, like you'll take that any day. And so I think Mackenzie's been good. I think for him early on, I think the key has been that he's gotten to a lot of 2-strike counts, but hasn't been able to put hitters away. When he does, you see what he did against the Phillies, and when he doesn't, you kind of see some of the more recent outings that he's had. But Mackenzie's been fine at the top of the rotation, and I think that they've gotten some good starts from Mitchell Parker. Jake Irvin had a really good outing last night. I think the other thing too is Michael Soroka is the guy they signed not to a contract this offseason. It was 1 year, $9 million. That was the most they still in the free agent. And his first start, he went out with a bicep strain, and he's working his way back. So they've had Brad Lord try to fill in this spot. I think this rotation maybe hasn't reached the full potential of what it can be, but I think they've shown some success so far. Obviously anchored by Mackenzie Gore. And I think they just have to keep performing well. And, I think part of the thing too is that the starting rotation has kept them in games, but as you mentioned, it's the bullpen that's kind of put them in trouble. Like I think the starting rotation has given the Nationals everything you can ask for, but it really is hard when your bullpen is, giving up runs in the late innings, and it makes it difficult for your team to come back.
All right. I think everybody expected this to be an issue given that they didn't spend a ton of money on their bullpen. Right. So what are the prospects of this thing moving forward? Is this going to be the Achilles heel all year long? If they get decent starting pitching, if they get more offense and more power than they got last year, is this going to be the thing we look back on and say they didn't do enough to bolster that bullpen?
Yeah, I think it could be. I think when you look at, I think there's a couple things. The first thing is that last year David Martinez really relied on Derek Law, and I want to say he made he made a handful of appearances last year. I can't remember the exact number, but this year he entered camp and was a little bit slow, and they were like, he's not going to pitch that much, and just so he's ready to pitch during the season. And now he's on the injured list and things are going slower than expected. So that was a guy that David Martinez could rely on in the middle innings to bridge the gap to the back end of the bullpen. And now he's not here. And so David's trying to figure out on the fly who can you trust in those situations. And just the guys that they put in just have not, lived up to that hype. I mean, they signed Lucas Sims to a deal this offseason. He hasn't pitched that well, and he's walking a lot of guys, which is a big problem to begin with. And it always has been for his whole career. Jorge Lopez has been kind of inconsistent. Even Jose Ferrer, who's supposed to kind of be their setup man for Kyle Finnegan and also close some games, has even struggled himself. And so, it's a mixture of, guys on 1-year deals who've had some struggles in the past couple seasons and that they signed and you hope for bounce backs, but also like when guys struggle, like there's a reason they struggle, right? And so it's like you can't always guarantee that they'll bounce back. And so I think it's kind of what you're seeing right now. They also the handful of young guys who are also trying to figure it out. So it's just been a bad combination so far, but they pitched well last night, but those are their best two relievers, so that's what you expect. But we'll see if that continues once they have to trust some of the other guys later in games.
You tweeted out that Davey Martinez had a meeting with his relievers yesterday before the game. What was that about?
I think it was just to sit them down, and Davey said he wanted the message to be positive and just reinforce that they have a lot of games left and not to panic over 16 games, and that was the message. And so he didn't go into the specifics of everything that was said, but he said that every reliever spoke, and the goal is to get them to all relax and calm down and not stress out about the start, because obviously they had the worst ERA in baseball heading into yesterday's game, and so that's the last thing you want to see, and I'm sure that took a toll on the whole bullpen.
Andrew, is there a bigger surprise in the National League right now than the bad start by the Braves?
That's up there. Yeah, that's up there. They had a pretty tough schedule to begin the year, but definitely that he couldn't even shake out a win or two against the Dodgers or they started the season with the Padres, and so I definitely think that's a shock. And they have an uphill climb being in that division. It is difficult to win that division. So that's definitely been the biggest shock for me. Obviously they get Spencer Strider back tonight, but they have an uphill battle for sure, especially in the NL East. So that definitely been the biggest surprise for me.
Maybe update, if you have it handy, everybody on Juan Soto's start in New York.
Repeat that again?
Juan Soto, what's his start been like in New York?
I think he's hitting like 250 to start the year. He's been okay. I think there was some controversy, I want to say a couple of days ago, because he kind of was mentioning that pitchers have been pitching him differently with the Mets than they have with the Yankees, and that's obviously because Aaron Judge was hitting behind him, and everybody gets pitched better when Aaron Judge is behind them. And so I think it's been a little bit of a tough start for him, but I think he's been fine because he hasn't been like the Juan Soto that you pay $765 million for. But I guess it's kind of hard to live with those expectations. You got to be an all-world player every year. So he's definitely got off to a cold start. I know that that drew some controversy, but I'm sure he'll be okay.
Two more in Pittsburgh for the Nats, including tonight with Mitchell Parker, who's actually pitched very well so far. Thanks, Andrew, for doing this. Always appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Andrew Golden, everybody, from the Washington Post. Nats are 7-10 overall through this early portion of the schedule of the schedule in the season. The National League East is kind of bunched up with the Mets a game ahead of the Phillies and 2.5 ahead of the Marlins, and Nats are 4 back, and it's the Braves who have started so poorly. Now they lost their first 7 games of the year. They were 0-7 when they started against San Diego and the Dodgers. But really the most impressive baseball so far for Washington was that series at home against the Dodgers, where they won 2 games, generated a ton of offense, and actually had a chance for the sweep when James Wood came up with 2 on in the bottom of the 9th in a game that they lost 6-5. But Wood right now is basically on pace for like 60 plus home runs. He is bashing it, and the opposite field home run last night to lead off the game was sensational. 6 homers in 17 games for James Wood. All right, we'll get back to some football next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So this is a swing for the stars or swing for the moon season. And even if you fall short, you're amongst the stars, as the great Donnie Simpson used to say when he played Lionel Richie and the Commodores at the end of every show, Jesus is Love. But I digress. This is a swing big offseason. I think they have to think that way with the draft, too. A week from tomorrow night, if they're on the clock at 29, I want them thinking about a player that can make an impact this year in January of 2026. You know, it would be nice if it were at a position of need. I view the draft for Washington that almost every position is a position of need, with the exception of quarterback, and I think a pure left tackle. It's really hard to find guys that can only play left tackle. If you draft a great tackle and all he played was left tackle in college, he's still a potential very good right tackle. But for me, I would look at it as you're not going to draft a quarterback. You're probably not going to take a left tackle. Everything else is in play. Everything else is in play. Obviously, the depth of defensive linemen, edge rushers in particular, and that being a big need for this team, means that has to be, the favorite for the position selected. And by the way, it is. I pulled up about 3 different betting sites with draft odds, and I basically averaged them out, and here is my work. Basically, the average odds of the position taken by Washington, which would be for the first player it selects, whether it's at 29, maybe a trade up, maybe a trade back, but the first player selected, the overwhelming favorite by position is defensive line. Now, that's a combination of D line, D tackle, and edge, D end, but on average, it's like a plus 150 favorite that's the position group they're going to take, followed by corner and O-line, which are pretty much tied at like 4-1. And then comes wide receiver, safety, and running back. Wide receiver a little bit ahead of safety, safety a little bit ahead of running back. And then everything else is kind of a long shot. Tight ends, not as long a shot. Linebackers, a long shot. Quarterback's a very long shot. I think that makes sense to me, that D-line, for our team's specific part of the D-line that we're talking about is an edge player. But if the best player on the board is a D tackle, won't shock me if they take that player. Daron Payne could be entering the final year of his career in Washington. So I want them to be thinking, yes, about the future, but also about a player that is ready, that can contribute in January of next year at a high level. That's what I'd like to see. I think Washington has an opportunity to find that. And, I was reading Ben Solak from ESPN. He put out basically the optimum draft for each of the 32 teams. And he essentially writes, once you make the NFC Championship game in your rookie quarterback's first season as a pro, you commit. You get the chips to the middle of the table. You trade up if you have to. And he finishes off after talking about various positions and various players by writing what I just said. Draft players you can envision starting this year and playing at a high level in meaningful games. That's what they should be looking for in this draft. Now, if you get that, that also means you have that player for the future. But you're not drafting on potential in this draft, not when you're in the position that they are in. I think right now that I don't care about the position group that they draft, assuming it won't be quarterback. I would also assume it would not be a linebacker, and I would assume that it would not be a left tackle. But I want them to take the best player available on the board. If it is a pass rusher, if it is a DN like a Nick Scourton from Texas A&M or a James Pierce from Tennessee, if it ends up being, a Nick Amanawuri, the safety from South Carolina, or Malachi Starks from Georgia, the safety, I'm going to be okay with that. If it ends up being a corner that they end up falling in love with, and they take, at 29, like a Siobhan Revelle from East Carolina, or, a guy like Will Johnson from Michigan. I'm not Will Johnson from Michigan. Max Hairston from Kentucky. I'm okay with that. I don't think the tight ends will be available for them at the end of the first round, the top two anyway, the tight ends in this class. You got two really good ones that kind of look a little bit like Brock Bowers. I think Tyler Warren plays a lot like Brock Bowers. And the guy from Michigan, also Colston Loveland, is a big-time prospect. You could have two tight ends go in the top 10, 12 picks of the draft. Mason Taylor, the son of, Jason Taylor, who played here briefly, is a potential late first-rounder, early second-rounder. And we've talked about running back. Like, if a Hampton were to drop to 29, I'd have no issues with that. I'd have no issues with Luther Burden as a wide receiver at 29. You take players that are the best on your board, but you take players that you think can perform and perform earlier rather than later. You're not drafting on down the road potential. You need that player in the first round, if you end up selecting a player in the first round, to play right away. And that means that, if a Shamar Stewart or a Mike Green, if they liked Mike Green, there's some baggage there. If for whatever reason they started to drop a really good player that they really liked, that's why I've not discounted a possible trade up, not with this team in the position they are in. You wouldn't think that you'd want to do that because you'd have to give up more picks, and now you're going to end up with less players in this draft, more likely than not. But if there's a player there that they have as the last player, let's say, as a first-round kind of a guy, and they don't think they can trade back, and trading up 3 spots is going to cost them a 5th-rounder or a 4th-rounder for a player that they feel really good about and is much higher rated on their board than anybody else, I don't think anything is out of the realm of possibility next week. I don't. Yeah, the position odds, the kind of back of the envelope averages of 3 different shops that had sort of NFL draft odds on the exact playing position of the first drafted player. D-line is the favorite. It's the significant favorite. And then you get to kind of O-line, corner, and wide receiver in that order. O-line and corner were kind of mixed up. Corner was higher in one area, O-line was higher in the other, but they averaged out to be about the same. And then it was wide receiver, and then it was safety and running back. Tight end came in a little bit further back than running back, but we could see that. So, Max, right now, which position do you think is the most likely that they select with their first pick? Whether that's in the first round, second round, at 29, higher or lower, and which position would you like them to pick?
So most likely, I think they're taking an edge, because it's such a deep class. There are so many guys that could be there. That's just where I think they're gonna go. But I would love like people. I feel like people are forgetting about Emeka Egbuka, just because he does everything on the field at a very high rate. But people are getting distracted by like Matthew Golden's speed. He keeps climbing the draft rankings.
He does.
They most recently, I think he got mocked to the Cowboys, which I feel like is a very Jerry Jones pick. But Emeka Egbuka is just, he's a guy I love in this draft, and he plays like a commander. I would love to see him on this team.
Yeah, my receivers after McMillan, and if you want to call Travis Hunter a receiver,
Sure.
the next in line for me has been and still is Luther Burden. Now, I don't know what the character is. I don't know what due diligence on the player may, reveal.
Mhm.
And that's going to be a big part of what they end up doing. We are going to see, I think, another attempt in year 2, even though they are much closer to winning big than they ever thought they would be in this moment. I don't see them taking chances on guys with any kind of character issues. It doesn't mean that every pick is going to be, I think 7 of their 9 picks last year were team captains.
Mhm.
They had the highest, aggregate RAS score in their draft. And they had 2 players that didn't even test, Jaden Daniels and Johnny Newton, because Newton was hurt for the combine last year. So those are things that are going to be things to look at going in. I'm not saying they got to be a team captain, but I do think they'll steer clear of anybody with any level of baggage.
For sure.
But for me, wide receiver wise, I do like T-Mac. I like McMillan a lot. I think, the size, there's a lot of Drake London
Mhm.
in McMillan for me. That would be the comp for me. Luther Burden, I've just loved for the last 2 years. To me, he's like, I don't want to say he is Tariq Hill, but in the open field in space, he is a problem to deal with, and he creates a lot of space. So he would be the receiver that if he went at 29 to Washington, I'd be excited about. Golden, to your point, the time shot him up. I like Egbuka. I do. And then you get into kind of later on, like Jack Beck from TCU. You want to talk about hands. I love Ty Felton from Maryland. I think he's now a projected day 3 pick. But, man, with no quarterbacks this year, Ty Felton was a star in the Big Ten as a wide receiver. I had somebody tell me recently that Kyle Williams, the wide receiver from Washington State, is flying up some boards. Tez Johnson to me is, he's a slot. He is tiny, but he's dangerous and he's a weapon. I would say for me, I predict D-end edge. I don't care where they go. I just hope it is best player on their board and a player that can make an impact earlier than later. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Your prediction on the position that Washington selects with its first overall pick, and which position group would you like it to be? 2 different things. Which do you predict they'll pick from position-wise, and which would you like to see? I think it'll be an edge. I think when we're sitting here a week from Friday morning, it's going to be Michael Williams. It's going to be a Nick Scourton. It's going to be an Azeru Aku from BC. It's going to be a Pierce Jr. It's going to be somebody like that we end up talking about. Somebody that ended up being a player they loved, that was the best player available on their board, which there's a good chance at the end will be, and that they really like from a character standpoint, etc. And they believe is an edge setter and a pass rusher. I think the guy that's probably most pro-ready is probably the BC kid. He's a true senior this year, highly productive at Boston College, 16 and a half sacks, was way up there in pressures. Donovan Azeru-Aku from BC is a possibility. They brought him in, I believe, on one of these top 20s. Wasn't he here yesterday as well? I think he was. That would be my guess, is that's the best odds. That's what we'll see is an edge a week from Thursday night. And I'm fine with, honestly, anything they do other than the obvious. They're not going to pick a quarterback. And they're probably not going to pick a left tackle. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Which position will Washington's first pick in the draft, which position will it be? And then which position would you like it to be? 301-230-0980. We have now a stream of this show. You can see Max and I at the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in Team 980, and please hit the subscribe button. I'm live 10 to 1 every day on the stream. Craig's live 4 to 7 every day. Don't forget to like the stream. That's very helpful for us. And turn on the notifications to stay up to date on all things DC Sports. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right, the Commanders hosted 20 or so prospects yesterday in Ashburn, including Quincy Riley and Maxwell Hairston. They ran back the famous Topgolf trip, and Dan Quinn and Adam Peters said that they found it beneficial because players were more relaxed and they could observe how players interacted with one another in a social setting. The Caps defeated the Islanders by a score of 3-1. Dylan Strome accounted for all 3 goals to honor his late dog Wrigley. This is his first hat trick as a Washington Capital. The Nats got the win in Pittsburgh by a score of 3-0. Jake Irvin gets the shutout win with 7 innings pitched, 6 strikeouts, and only 3 hits. James Wood also hit this massive 445-foot bomb out to right center field.
3-2 pitch. Wood, a long drive, straightaway center and deep. Forget about it. This one heading out toward the river. It is long, long gone. It bounces out of PNC Park and down toward the Allegheny River. James Wood's first career leadoff home run. 6 pitches in. The Nationals lead 1-0.
They continue their series tonight at 6:40 on 106.7 The Fan. Netflix will be releasing a documentary on the infamous Wizards locker room dispute between Gilbert Arenas and Javaris Crittenton in 2009 when guns were drawn. It will release on May 6th. The NBA play-in continues to roll on. The Magic beat the Hawks 120-95, and the Warriors beat the Grizzlies 121-116. The Heat will take on the Bulls tonight at 7:30, and the Mavs will take on the Kings at 10. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream, turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Which position will Washington draft with its first pick? Prediction on that. And then which position would you like to see them select with their first overall pick? For me, I think the odds are heavily stacked in the favor of the deepest position in this draft, which is D-line. And I would say specific to that, it would be an edge rusher. It would be a D-end. What do I want? I want them to draft the best player available. They have needs. I want a player that's going to make an impact sooner rather than later. I don't want a guy that they're thinking long-term about, because if you draft a guy that's going to make an impact right away, it's probable that that player is going to be pretty good long-term as well. They have a season upcoming that is the best chance that they've had odds-wise since 2000, all right, in 25 years, to do some damage. Their over-under in Vegas is 10.5 on wins. They're going to be predicted across the board to be a playoff team, to be a team that has a chance to get to a Super Bowl in 2025. I think it's really important that they take the best player available, and I would love that player to be a player that steps on the field very quickly and makes an impact. I mean, it'd be hard for the first player in their 2025 draft to match what the first player in their 2024 draft did. I don't think we'll ever see that again. But yeah, I would like it to be a player that makes an impact. I think that the position group that is the best odds is D-line, edge in particular, but I don't really care where it comes from. 301-230-0980. Let's start with our guy Kev in Arlington. Kevin, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for taking my call. So I've been saying all offseason, really since Philly dominated us in the NFC Championship game, the number one most glaring need on the roster is a defensive end who can set the edge. I'm not sure, Kevin, if at 29, who I would like them to draft is truly a number one pick. In other words, I also think they need to add one or more draft picks. I would like to see them trade down into the second so they can add, somewhere between the first and the third, or probably between the second and the third. But the kid I like is Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. He had a terrific season. He's lengthy. He's terrific at setting the edge. He gets after the quarterback. He knows Jaden Daniels. He used to be at LSU. I just see this guy as a little under the radar, but what he's really great at is edge setting. Green and so many of the others who, we would hope to fall or whatever, they're really unproven as edge setters. And I just want to say one more thing. I was relieved we didn't trade for Myles Garrett or Trey Hendrickson, because as great as they are as impact players, they're both lousy against the edge and setting it.
Well, Myles Garrett isn't.
Statistics show it.
Myles Garrett isn't.
Yeah, he is. Kevin, if you look at the stats, he is. Khalil Mack, Max Crosby, Nick Bosa, those are really good edge setters. Garrett is not good at it. And the stats back it up. When you have the next guy on who knows about edge,
I had all this. I had the PFF guy on from the beginning. Myles Garrett has been, during the course of his year, a top 3 run stopper in the NFL as a defensive end.
He's a great disruptive player. He's not great at setting the edge. I think there's a lot of evidence.
I disagree.
That.
I disagree. And most of the data suggests he's an outstanding run stopper.
Okay, I'll send you data that suggests otherwise.
If we're going to get into the comparison of data, and we both probably have views of PFF that are probably pretty similar. We're not sitting there documenting it ourselves. I'm just giving you the PFF data. He's been the most dominant defensive end, both, as a pass rusher for sure, but this past year was maybe a bit of a step back against the run, but throughout his career, he's been a high-end run defender as well. But when you watch Cleveland using your own eyes, when you watch him, do you think he's not a good run stopper? You don't think he's a havoc wreaker as an edge setter?
Max Crosby is the perfect defensive end at doing
but he's not available.
Okay. Right. What I'm trying to say is that's what Garrett should be as an edge defender, and I disagree. I don't see it.
I see
I don't
it.
think a lot of people see it.
I definitely see it. Here's the thing, though, on Trey Hendrickson. It ain't over yet.
He's not good at it either.
I agree with Hendrickson is not the edge setter or the run stopper that Garrett is, not even close. But I would say that it's not over on Hendrickson. I think we're getting into something's going to happen between now and the draft.
We can't beat Philly until we fix that problem. We are terrible at that. Really bad. Yeah. We need
on that we agree.
And Lucian Jackson is that guy.
On that we agree. I think it's an offensive league for sure, and there were times in which we were both proven wrong last year, games in which they could not stop the run and they won anyway. And it didn't happen though in the championship game. And to be back in that position again next year where you're hoping for your quarterback to bail you out week in and week out when you can't get off the field defensively, that's a tough road to 14, 15 wins and into the Super Bowl. So we agree on that. I think we've always agreed on that. And they got to improve.
One last thing, we do.
Yeah.
We do agree on that. But and it was a problem all year, not just in the NFC Championship game. We've not been good at that.
I know. And yet they kept winning games. They couldn't stop the run against Atlanta. They couldn't stop the run against the Eagles. They couldn't stop the run against teams over and over again. And they kept winning games because of their quarterback. It's not the way to go, though.
I guess I'm concerned about Philly. I'm like Doc Walker. We got to focus on how do we beat Philly.
Yeah, we got to end up with more. We have to end up on top of the division so that there are games at home in January to get to the Super Bowl. No doubt. Thanks, Kev, as always.
Great call, Kevin. Thanks for going back and forth with me on it.
Yep. Arthur in Tampa. Arthur, the position that you think they'll draft, the position that you'd like them to draft in the first round.
How you doing, Kevin? I think that they're going to draft defensive end. What I want them to do, and I know that this may seem kind of far-fetched, but everybody's talking about Jaden Daniels and how he's on the rookie contract. But one thing we're not considering is that we drafted him at number 2, and we didn't have to trade up to get him. So I would like us to do kind of like a Julio Jones Atlanta move and trade up and get either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. Give us another elite
That's
prospect.
27 spots.
Yeah.
You don't have enough to do that. By the way, let me just say this. I love the way you're thinking. All right. I love the thinking big, but that is thinking too big and too outrageously because it's not going to happen. But I love it. Like add Travis Hunter or add Abdul Carter, but think about what you'd have to give up. I mean, you're talking about multiple years of first-round picks. This year, next year, and I don't know, maybe the year after that to move up 27 spots.
But you got to think about it, too. We didn't have to give up anything to get Jaden Daniels. And if we get someone like Travis Hunter, we could pair him, with Jaden Daniels. Travis Hunter might be the best non-quarterback to come out the draft in like the next 5 or 10 years. So,
you might be right about that.
I know it's probably not going to happen, but it's just a thought on.
All right. So that's what you'd like to happen. What position do you think will happen?
I think they'll get a DN. One of the DNs that'll fall to 29.
Thanks for the call. Appreciate it as always, Arthur. Good one, though. Can you imagine? Like, I think it will be very surprising if they were to just trade up a few spots for, like, the edge rusher that they really want or the corner that they really want. I think that would shock a lot of people. It would not shock me because I do think they're in this mode of they want a player who is going to have a first-round grade, and if they can't get him at 29 and you can't trade back because everybody sees the draft the same way, that it is, there's depth to it, but it's not, especially top heavy, then a trade up a couple of spots wouldn't, be nuts. But no, a trade up to draft Travis Hunter, I just don't even think they would have enough ammo to do it. Let's go to Daryl in Columbia. Daryl, go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my my call.
Sure.
Yeah, Kevin, I think what I would like them, who I would like them to take, and who I think they're going to take is this guy by the name of Ian Huntington. I don't know what team he's playing with, but he's about 285, and he plays like Michael Parsons. And he can play inside, outside. He is a beast. He's a beast. And I would love for them to get take it to the house running back. Travion, if they can trade up to get him. But everywhere else, Kevin, on the team, I think we're solid. I think we're solid. I think, we got solid players at the corner. This guy Jones from New England, I like him. He got speed. The guy that we replaced as strong safety, that played with Lattimore in New Orleans, I like him. These are like veterans. And I think, Kevin, what they're trying to do while Jaden is on this rookie contract, I think that they're getting good blue chip players that can go in there right away and plug it in and make us competitive. And I think once Jaden gets his contract, then they're going to start going for the younger players on a 4-year contract because they're not going to be able to afford these other veterans that they're getting now.
Yeah,
that's my take.
Yeah, well, that's why you trade for Marshawn Lattimore, Deebo Samuel, and Laramie Tunsil now, because you've got the rookie on the rookie contract. I think that there is, like, if somebody said, we talked about this at the end of the season, like the focus should be on defense. You got to get better defensively. There are a lot of ways to get better defensively that don't include adding new players. There are players that didn't play a lot last year. Now, they've added a lot of players, from Kinlaw to Goldman to the New England guy, Wise to Jones to Will Harris, who's basically the replacement for Jeremy Chin. You've got a guy like Jordan McGee, who they really liked last year. You got a guy, like John Baptiste, who they really liked as a 7th rounder. We forget sometimes, and I say this all the time, we forget about last year's draft when the first season is in the books. Most players aren't significant contributors in their first year. So there is hope that some of the players that weren't significant contributors last year end up being significant contributors this year. On offense, the perfect example obviously would be a Luke McCaffrey. He had the opportunities snap-wise. He didn't have the he didn't produce, but that's because the ball didn't really come his way, because he certainly got open. But defensively, you also just have the year-to-year variability of defenses just end up changing more often than offenses year to year. And year 2 in the same system that we think is well coached, led by Dan Quinn and, of course, Joe Witt Jr., but maybe they just think a couple of spots like a Kinlaw and a Wise will make a big difference, that McGee will be a factor. Luvu in year 2. Luvu is their best defensive player, I thought, by far. And maybe this is a big sack year for Luvu. Maybe he gets into double digits in sacks. We'll see. Like, I'm excited to see what Marshawn Lattimore can be. It'd be nice to have Marshawn Lattimore at his best. Quan Martin, I thought, played well. Sanders still was a rookie last year, and he played well. So they may be looking at it like, we were young in a couple of spots. We were, just adapting to a new system and adapting to each other. We needed a couple of big dudes, and they went big with Kinlaw and with Goldman and with Wise. But it would still be nice to have a real game changer up front. That's for sure. All right, those of you I didn't get to, I apologize. We can come back to this next hour if you'd like. I do have Chris Miller, voice of the Wizards, scheduled next. We'll talk about the Wizards season in retrospect, because we didn't really talk about it during the season. and we'll do some NBA playoffs as well. And then we'll come back to this. So for all of you that I didn't get to, we'll do it at 12:15, 12:20 again. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 to team980.com. If you need new windows, Window Nation is where I would go right now. Buy 4, get 4 free with no money down, no interest, and no payments for 2 full years. So you don't have to pay anything until the year 2027. New windows are going to give you better insulation, which will lead to lower heating and air conditioning bills. It starts with a free in-home estimate by calling them at 866-90-NATION or heading to windownation.com. Mention my name. They'll get an estimate scheduled for you at your convenience. They'll be in and out of your home in an hour or less. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com. Joining me for the first time in a while, and it's my apology, but, 18 wins over many months, even though there were some interesting things to watch, a lot of good young players, and I loved your call of Bub Carrington's game winner in the season finale on Sunday in Miami, is the voice of the Washington Wizards on Monumental Sports, one Chris Miller, at C Mills PXP on X and on Twitter. So let me just start with, when you have a team that is the worst team or the second worst team in the NBA and you got to call 82 games, and I think you called 82 games, you're certainly close to 82. Give me the challenges night in and night out. What are you trying to achieve other than just calling a solid game?
Oh, no, I called all 82, Kevin. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just call me the broadcaster Iron Man. 3 straight years of calling.
Well, I didn't know if
82.
any of the games were nationally televised where you didn't get to call it.
No,
I guess they didn't have any of those.
82. No, it's not really a challenge when you know going in that this was a season where they're trying to figure out who to identify long term. And we knew that the rookies were going to play heavy minutes. All 3 that were drafted got over 25 minutes a game all season. And I appreciate the transparency by Wizards front office. Michael Winger and Will Dawkins was straight up with us before the season started, letting us know the expectations of the organization. So it's kind of easy to do your job that way when you kind of like going in knowing that this team doesn't have aspirations for the playoffs this year. It's to develop the 3 kids that they drafted in the first round and then ended up getting A.J. Johnson from Milwaukee. So to have 4 first-round picks, I got a chance every night to kind of see them grow, have their good times, bad times, mostly watching these kids grow. That was kind of like the whole goal all year long, is to see what they would look like at season's end. And then I appreciate what you said about my call last play of the season, it being a rookie, by the way, played all 82 games this season in Carlton Bub Carrington. And that's kind of like the capper to the 24-25 season.
All right, let's talk about the young guys. But before we get to the first rounders from the last draft, tell me what kind of season Bilal Coulibaly had.
Up and down. I even think to his standard, he would say the same thing. Unfortunately, his season ended kind of the way it ended in his rookie year, missing the last 15, 16 games of the year, not able to complete, the season. But for him, I think we all know he is going to be a really good on-ball defender. And for every year that he's in the league, hopefully we see his offense improve. But, Kevin, you've seen the NBA, you've watched it for years. It's very rare when I tell you a rookie's staple and his standard is guarding the best perimeter players in the NBA. So that's what made Bilal unique. But he'll tell you that, going into his 3rd year, there has to be improvement really on all aspects of his game.
Before we get to the young players from last year's draft, what was the environment like? When you're losing that many games and you don't have a chance in a lot of them, and I thought they played competitively at various points during the season, but you still have 18, 19, 20-year-olds, a bunch of them. What was it like to be around that group?
Surprisingly, these are professional kids. And what I mean by that is clearly their upbringing kind of prepared them for this moment. Unfortunately, Bub's father passed away towards the end of our longest road trip of the year, and they just had his funeral yesterday. So Bub, towards the end of the year, was really dealing with someone that really introduced him to the game of basketball and was his father. And to play all 82 and to have that mindset, you tip your hat to that young man. Keyshawn George played overseas before he went to Miami one year to play for Jim Larinaga, and his father kind of taught him the game of basketball and kind of navigated him through the waters. Alex Sarr had an older brother that already played in the NBA. So these kids kind of just
came into this environment, I think prepared, maybe more prepared than most rookies because of their journey to get here. So they were serious-minded youngsters. And even when I think we had 2 16-game losing streaks this year,
yeah,
I never really got the sense that they were like, what the hell did I sign up for? I got the sense from them that this organization put veterans around them to kind of help them navigate. And that's really the most important thing. And I give a lot of credit to the organization for doing this. If you're going to go about an experiment of drafting players, giving them heavy minutes, and having to deal with the result of a night in, night out, you need to put players around them that can kind of explain to them, like, look, keep your head up. You know, it's not going to always be this way. These long losing streaks won't always be this way. And I think they've done a good job with that. So I never really got the sense all year long, Kevin, that these kids were just down on the situation that they found themselves in terms of win-loss.
All right. Alex Sarr was the number 2 overall pick. Carrington, Keyshawn George, and you mentioned, of course, the addition of A.J. Johnson at the trade deadline for super young players. So, you know, I think what Wizards fans would want to know is, fast forward 3-4 years down the road, do you see a star? Do you see a top 5, top 10 player in the league in the group? It's early, but I'm asking you for your hunch.
Keyshawn George kind of surprised me throughout the year. And again, that's the beauty of being around for 82 games, narrating these games. I didn't just pop in and out. I was able to see first game against Boston, last game against Miami, and all of it in between.
Yeah.
Keyshawn took some major steps from first game against Boston to the end of the year. Dealt with a little bit of an ankle issue, missed 7 games, came back. And I really like his upside in terms of kind of being like a Swiss Army knife, can kind of do everything, likes guarding smaller guards, shots at 3, I thought well, could do a little bit of everything. Alex might have the highest ceiling because he's a 7-footer that can shoot threes. But Bub Carrington, to me, Kevin, has 3 discernible things that I noticed all year long that is transferable in year 3 and year 4. One, he is highly intelligent. His basketball IQ is next level to me. 2, he's ultra competitive, being a guard from Baltimore. Kevin, you know how guards from Baltimore are. I can just go from the 80s, 90s. He's highly competitive. And 3, he's available. Playing all 82 games was actually a goal of his before the season started. And for him to do that, and then on the last game of the season to play all 82, he hits the game winner to end the season. Carrington was only one of 11 NBA players all year, Kevin, to play all 82. And I heard you earlier talking about how the regular season is kind of unwatchable for some. But for me to see this kid play all 82, that's pretty impressive, again, considering there was only 11 guys in the league to do so.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you knew even early on, and you watched it so much more closely than us, but he's got that tough Baltimore, competitiveness, exterior, interior, the whole thing. But you started with Keyshawn George, and I did talk about him during the season because when I would tune in, he was the one that stood out to me as a guy that can do a lot of different things. And I guess I was surprised too. And by the way, I think he'll end up being a much better shooter percentage-wise. He was a 33%, 32% three-point shooter. But that stroke is that's a much higher than a 32 or a 33% three-point shooter. And I thought, by the way, Alex Sarr also, like you said, he can really stretch the floor. But back to George, maybe not the number 1 or a number 2 on a contending team, but a big part of a contending team down the road, if they got there.
And the reason why I like that is his positional size, Kevin. He's 6'8", right? And I've said this throughout the year with Drew. I don't know if we even know who he is as an NBA player yet. You got to remember, this year and last year at the U was really the first times he didn't have the ball in his hand.
Yeah.
This kid can actually, run your pick and roll. He can actually facilitate your offense. I'm not saying he's the primary ball handler, but I think he has the ability long-term to be a guy that you can count on to bring the ball up. Listen, Brian Keefe this year had multiple ball handlers. You get it off the rim, go push it. We saw that with Sarr. I think Sarr, from rim to rim, it's crazy to say this, he might be the fastest big in the league. Because when he gets the ball off the rim, he can actually push it and try to go rim to rim. So, again, having the ability to see these youngsters every night, you got to see some nuance about what they look like this year and what's potentially forecasted down years 3 and 5 if they're still with the organization.
So, look, we're a month away, right, from the draft lottery, and a rather large one in the history of this franchise because of who sits at the top, Cooper Flagg. It's, I would not put him in the Wembanyama class. I don't even know if I'd put him in the Zion Williamson class in terms of what we thought of Zion coming out. But he is as good as anybody else in the last, 8 to 10 years. So have you allowed yourself to imagine a team that adds Cooper Flagg to these young players next year, and the attention, by the way, Chris, that it would bring to the team?
Yeah, when, I covered every game, yes. My focus is on the team, the game, but I have watched Cooper Flagg play since he was 16 years old.
Right.
As you know, I am a huge fan of prep basketball, AAU, EYBL. So, yes, I've seen Cooper for years. And, of course, we would all kind of imagine what it would be like to win the lottery. And if he's the presumptive, I'm going to say presumptive because I'm just hedging everything, Kevin, right? But he is a game changer for a lot of reasons. Yes, I would not say he's in the Kevin Durant, LeBron James, that kind of ilk of coming into the league. But he can come into the locker room right away with the way he gets to the game of basketball, with his intensity, his defensive effort, his great teammate ability. And I still think that's a skill set, Kevin, to be a great player and bringing the others along with you. Cooper Flagg checks off every box. But the other two kids are really good too. I really like Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. I think those are the three kids that are at the top of the table. And then I think there's this next tier player in this draft. But those three caught my eye really all season long when, I had a chance to watch college basketball. But Cooper, yes, head of the class, one of one right now in terms of the best player or the potential best player in this draft.
Yeah, I'm not as big an Ace Bailey fan, and you know me, I watch a lot more college than pro during the regular season, but I love Dylan Harper. Like, if they ended up with number 2, Dylan Harper is going to be a star in the league. He's going to score a lot of points as an NBA player. I think those two, Flagg and Harper, are ahead of everybody else. And let's not forget, for those that don't know, the Wizards also will end up picking later in the first round, I think at number 19. Overall, or somewhere around there. All right, let's change the subject. Did you stay up and watch Golden State Memphis last night?
Come on, man. It's in my system. It's in my blood. I can't go to sleep without watching.
How good was
Jimmy
that?
Butler. Listen. First of all, I heard you earlier. Do you know I called one 5-second call all season?
I know.
It was one time. One time.
Yeah.
So it's like the most unusual, not going to happen kind of play, if you want to call it a play, of an out of bounds, not be able to get it in. That was a head scratcher. But Steph Curry, man, I think he can play. I think he's going to be like LeBron, where he's going to be playing in his 40s because his skill set, I think, transfers from high school to the YMCA and all points in between, right? His shot can it's just something how he can get himself open. And remember when they were pressing and he got open? They were like,
oh, yeah.
Guys on him.
I talked about that. He was double teamed and he got open like a slot receiver gets open. And they got the ball in bounds to him. And of course, that's the guy you don't want touching the ball because he'll be at the free throw line and he won't miss.
I think they've had the second best record since Butler got there. So they put themselves in a good position by beating Memphis last night. Listen, Draymond Green still deserves a lot of credit. I think he had six rebounds and 10 assists last night. So to have your 5-man kind of get your offense going, but I don't know about the series against Houston. I don't know. Houston has got some dogs over there, and I don't know if they're old enough yet to be mature enough in a first-round series against Golden State. That's going to be the one that I'm definitely going to watch because I feel like Butler and Curry is enough. But, man, that kid Şengün and then Thompson, they got a lot of pieces over there in Houston. It's going to be a really good first-round series.
Golden State's favored in the series and a healthy favorite in the series. It's the first time, I think, in 30 years a 7 seed has been favored over a 2 seed. So we'll see. I mean, it's all about what you and I both know as longtime NBA fans. Teams that don't have playoff experience typically have to gradually earn their way to the finals over a period of a few years. And we'll see that with Oklahoma City. We'll see that, with a team like Detroit, who I've actually, I think they've got a shot to beat the Knicks. But, back to Golden State for just a moment. I agree with you on Steph Curry. I think he can play for a long time. Look, if they ended up with a superstar player beyond a Jimmy Butler, let's just say, he could, at 43 years old, be a spot-up shooter, off of a great player in the game. Butler just, every year, I'm like watching him in the postseason, and I'm like, do people realize how good he is? Like, he is a legitimate superstar when the playoffs begin. And you talked about Draymond's IQ. I mean, they've got 3 of the highest IQ players on one team in the league with Butler, Draymond, and Curry.
Yeah, I think with Butler last night, you noticed right away he was ultra aggressive.
Oh, man.
Normally, he kind of likes to feel the game out and kind of get his teammates involved. That wasn't Jimmy Butler III last night. He was like, I'm in attack mode. I'm going to set the tone, and then everybody else kind of follow what I'm doing, and that includes Steph Curry. So it was like Butler was like, I set the tone. Everybody else kind of follows. One more thing about Steph Curry, and this is kind of like my analogy with him. I think he potentially could be like the Nolan Ryan of baseball. Nolan Ryan was in his 40s still throwing gas, right? So Curry, I think even in his 40s can still hit, from 35 feet on these threes. So I think just his game is like fine wine. I think it wouldn't surprise me if he played into his 40s.
Well, this. Shooters never stop shooting. You can be 75 years old, and if you were a shooter at 25 years old, you can still shoot the basketball. The issue with him is he's so good without the ball. And last night, apparently he ran mileage-wise more than he had in any game this year. And you just see his movement and his ability to not even with screens at times. It's just to get open, and that would be the part that you would wonder, will it deteriorate? Will he be able to create the space that he needs if he's the creator rather than the recipient, just sort of spotting up? But I love watching him, and I like watching that team. I think they have a really good chance. What about the rest of the West? Are you a believer that what we saw from OKC in the regular season will translate to best of sevens this time of year?
I think it's the matchup in the second and potential conference finals with them. I really, really enjoyed watching them play all year. I think SGA is the MVP. Yep. They did something unique coming out of the break that harkened me back to the good old days where they actually deployed 2 bigs, where they had Hartenstein out there and Chet Holmgren.
Yeah.
And, oh, my gosh, that's a tough matchup. When you put shooters around those 2 bigs that both are really good passers, high-low action, passing out to the corners for Jalen Williams and everyone else. So and they don't have to do it like the whole game, Kevin. They can do a 5-minute spurt of 2 big lineup. They can go small. OKC can do it all, right? They have everything that they need to win it. It's just kind of like that experience factor that you talked about.
Yeah, I think they ended up with 7 players averaging in double figures. And by the way, who had an excellent year for them was Aaron Wiggins, former Terp.
Absolutely.
who's really developed into a very good NBA basketball player.
You know,
I
those
think
first aren't half bad in the NBA, Kevin. I saw
There are
Herder
a bunch
last
of 'em.
week. He's doing well. Yeah, not bad. And you're about
Yeah.
to get another one. That kid Derek
They're
Queen's
about-
going to be special, too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's too bad the Wizards' second pick isn't a little bit higher. The series that I can't wait for, because he's just, for me, he's a mercurial kind of a player all time. But when he's healthy, I still think he is top 3 in terms of the two-way players in the game. And
Kawhi
they have
Leonard.
been playing well. Kawhi and Harden and Zubats, who's turned into a really good player, and Powell. I actually think they could make a run to the finals. What do you think?
Kevin, I've been a mark for Kawhi Leonard
Me
since
too.
his days in San Antonio, man. And it just hurts me every time that injury costs him a season or an important series. But I'm all in again, man. I'm all in
Right.
again. Just watching him play kind of to close out the season, playing back-to-backs, logging 40 minutes, getting back to looking like the Kawhi in San Antonio, Kawhi in Toronto. And now James Harden has accepted kind of like the secondary role on that team. Chris Dunn is a really good on-ball defender. You talked about Zubats, but, you know, I think of Batum. I mean, they've got so many veterans.
Powell he should have been an all-star.
Yeah. And that's kind of why I kind of like it. I think they have the best coach in the West. That's just my opinion. I think Ty Lue is the best in the West in terms of coaching. So I'm with you on the Clippers. It's just I'm crossing my fingers and my toes that Kawhi can stay healthy and show really the best version of himself. There will be no back-to-backs in the playoffs, so he'll be able to get that requisite rest that he needs. But if he stays healthy, I'm with you. The Clippers could come out of the West.
What about LeBron and Luka and JJ Redick? You know, JJ Redick, because of the Luka trade, has almost been, you know, backburnered as, you know, a rookie head coach who's got that team as a 3 seed. A lot of people like the Lakers now to come out of the West. What do you think?
You know, I still think defense matters, Kevin. As crazy as it sounds in 2025, where everybody's like shoot threes, score as many points as you can, but everything slows down in the playoffs. And I think, honestly, you have 2 liabilities on the defensive end with Doncic and James. And if you're a really, really good coach and you can kind of scheme up some stuff, one of them is going to have to guard Anthony Edwards in this series. Somebody's going to have to guard Ant. Somebody's going to have to guard Julius Randle. Somebody's going to have to deal with Gobert. And while I'm sure everyone thinks the Lakers are going to win that series, I'll be curious to see who guards who in that series.
Well, Luka can't guard Edwards. That can't happen.
So where's the matchup?
I don't know, but that can't happen.
You see what I'm saying? So we can look at it from an offensive standpoint and be excited about all the stars.
Yeah.
But when you get into the nuance of the strategy of the game and the series, I just want to know who are those 2 guys going to guard against Minnesota?
It'll be interesting to see. Maybe it's Rui, who, by the way, has really turned into an excellent player.
Really
the East. I mean, it's Boston, right? I mean, do you give Cleveland a chance?
I want to. Being a guy that lived there for 6 years, I've always had some ties and love for Northeast Ohio. But I just saw the Celtics probably a week ago.
Yeah.
And Kevin, Joe Mazzulla doesn't get a lot of credit for being the type of coach that can manage that situation. Boston, where it's championship or bust, right? So now they're going for, can we go back-to-back? And I've said this multiple times when we play the Celtics. I'm never really concerned about Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis. Either they play against us or they're hurt, right? The 3 guys that keep me up at night in terms of like my preparation is Luke Cornett, Sam Hauser, and Peyton Pritchard. So when you've got 3 guys off your bench that during the regular season can have explosion moments, and now you incorporate them into their big 3, Derek White, oh, by the way, Al Horford. I think they're destined to get back there again. The health of Porzingis is always going to be a factor. Jaylen Brown kind of dragged the leg a little bit towards the end of the regular season, but they've got everything they need to go do it again.
Thank you. for doing this. It's good to hear your voice. And let's hope for the best in the in the draft lottery. Appreciate it, Chris.
We can only hope, right? We got our fingers crossed over here, Kevin.
See you. Chris Miller, everybody, voice of the Wizards. The NBA play-ins got started last night, and the Golden State-Memphis game was incredible. All right, if you're still on the phone lines or if you want to weigh in, 301-230-0980, what's the position you predict Washington will take with its first overall pick? And which position would you like them to pick with their first overall selection in the draft? 301-230-0980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Three 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Which position will Washington select in the first round? By the way, the odds, and I shared this with you earlier, are overwhelmingly that it will be a defensive lineman. Now, there's no distinction between D tackle and D end, but they are basically, that position is like plus 150. A heavy favorite over O-line and corner, followed by wide receiver, safety, and running back in that order. Which position do you think Washington will select in the first round? Which position would you like them to select in the first round? My answer was it's more likely than not, because of the depth of the position and, by the way, the need, that Washington, when they get to their pick at the end of the first round, or if they trade back or if they trade up, that the best player on their board, odds-wise, would be a defensive lineman. Also fills a need. But I don't care what they pick. I honestly do not care. I want the best player available. I want them to be thinking about a player that can help now, that they believe can contribute when they get to, the season, and then most importantly, in the biggest games of the season, which, by the way, they're going to have a ton of based on their schedule right now. By the way, we'll be talking schedule tomorrow with one of the NFL's schedule makers, Mike North. So tune in for that. All right, 301-230-0980. Let's get to the phone lines. Thanks for holding. Let's start with Lap. Lap's been on hold for a while. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Kevin? Thanks for taking my call. I think they're gonna go with a defensive lineman, but I would want a corner or receiver. I'm not really sold on the secondary. I'm hoping that they can be better if Lattimore really plays. Sanders still was really good last year. And I like some of those other guys, but it just when we ain't getting no pressure, I need them guys to kind of hold their position. And it's a pass-happy league, so we need that. Receivers, I'm not really sold on. Only in a sense, I think we got talent there, but I just think we need another receiver. Hopefully we can get a young one that can play right away and be meaningful. Now, if McCaffrey turns out to be what we hope he is and he balls out this year, then I'm not, too worried.
Right.
And also with Debo, he has a tendency to miss a lot of games, and then he's ready for the postseason, so he's kind of scary. But and Trey Henderson, I think we need to revisit that. And that was a good point you had made earlier about a possibility of, that could be in the works, because it's not over yet because the draft is not here. So we'll see.
Yeah, Trey Hendrickson. I'm sorry. I thought you said Trey Henderson is in the running back from Ohio State. Yeah, I don't think that I think the Trey Hendrickson activity is really going to start to ramp up between now and the draft. If something happens with him, and I think there's still a decent chance it'll happen between now and a week from now.
Yeah.
So
and Kevin, another position I would want is a tight end, because I'm so used to, from Cooley all the way down to Jordan Reed, Vernon Davis, like Fred Davis. We had some dogs at tight ends, and I think.
Did you mention Fred Davis? Were you really mentioning Fred Davis?
I did like Fred Davis. He was solid
he was an athlete.
Point, I'm saying wasn't the best, but I'm just saying we've always had some really good tight ends, and if we could get that with Jaden to have that consistent tight end, man. I like Zach Ertz, no doubt, but I'm just saying we got to think about a lot of these positions when these guys are done, because we got veterans at certain positions now, and we got to look for impact.
Well, I think they hope Ben
Sinnott
will end up being that guy. They took him in the second round.
I like Sinnott too.
Yeah, so we'll see.
I like Sinnott. Yep.
Thanks, Lap. Appreciate it. Let's go to Scott.
Right,
Scott, go ahead. Thanks for holding.
Well, hey, I think they're going to draft the edge rusher, but I would love to see them get a big-time running back, an explosive running back, and just reach for something like that and spend the rest of the draft picks on defense. But if it's that Travion Henderson or Ashton Genty, if someone explosive.
Well, they're not high enough to take Genty. Genty could be a top 10 pick.
But maybe Travion Henderson. I keep saying he's going to be available.
Yep. Yeah,
that could change the.
This is a loaded running back draft. The draft experts love all of them, and the issue, and we've talked about this in recent days, Scott. To me, is you don't use number 29 overall on a running back if you don't think that running back's going to be elite. If you don't think there's a Saquon Barkley or a Jahmyr Gibbs or a Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey kind of a player there. Because the draft is so deep and because you find good running backs typically, on day 3, and this is a deep running back draft, the only way I'd want a running back selected in the first round is if they think this is, we've got a massive difference maker. This is an impact player at the position, which many people think Genty and even Hampton will be. I don't think Hampton will slip to 29. It depends on which mock draft or which mock drafts, plural, you're paying attention to. It certainly appears as if he's going to go sooner than 29. But if those two are the only two they deem to be massive impact elite backs, future Hall of Fame backs, than wait until day 3 or maybe night 2 and get like a guy like Damian Martinez, who I love, or a Caleb Johnson. I love TreVeyon Henderson. I think Trey Henderson's game-breaking speed and ability, maybe they see him that way. If they see him that way, or if they see a Judkins that way, both of the Ohio State backs, maybe they do pick a player there. I just wouldn't do it unless I feel like we have the guy. We've got a top 3 running back in the league for the next 7 years. I wouldn't do it with a first rounder, you know? Thank you, Scott.
Yep,
appreciate it. Let's go to Rodney. Rodney, thanks for holding. Go ahead. Rodney, you there? Put Rodney on hold. Let's go to DC in Waldorf. DC, go ahead.
Kevin, great day. Yes,
what's up, DC?
I definitely, man, all is well. I definitely believe that they're going to get a lineman. I don't think they're going to get they'll get a DN that can definitely play the run and rush the passer. And then if not, they'll probably get a D tackle because we want to show up stopping the run. But I would love for us, if either one of the running backs start to fall, I would love for us to go up and get Genty if he falls in that 10 area, maybe a little behind. And of course, if Hampton is there, I would love to get one of those running backs.
Yeah, I mean, if they really thought that Omarion Hampton was the next Saquon Barkley, let's just say, and he's available somewhere in the early to mid 20s, and they had him as clearly the best player on their board by miles. And by the way, it's a deep edge rushing draft as well.
Yeah.
And you have to give up a day 3 pick to move up 4 or 5 spots to take a Hampton. I'm fine with that. Do I think it'll happen? No, I don't. I think Hampton and Genty will both be gone. I think the interesting one will be Judkins or Henderson. One of the 2 Ohio State backs. Do they end up going in the first round? Do teams see them as superstar backs worthy of a first-round selection? I think the over-under on running backs max is 2.5 in this draft. I think that's the over-under on the position. And I think the third is either Judkins or Henderson. That would be my guess. But, yeah,
if Henderson's available in the second, we should definitely get Henderson. If he's available, like if Henderson's available in the second, I definitely think we should move up and get him or do what we need to do to get him because he's definitely – explosive and he falls in that role, like you said, as a captain, as a leader, and all of those things. And he's dynamic too.
Yeah, both of those backs, Judkins when he transferred from Ole Miss, and Henderson, who, by the way, as a freshman, was thought to be the next superstar back in college football. He battled some injuries during the course of his career, but I mean, he opened up in his first game as a freshman. I think the game was at, Minnesota. On the road. It may have been home, took a screen pass, went like 90 yards with it. And you're like, oh my God, this guy with the speed, because he's got massive top end speed. What did he run 40-wise, Max? TreVeyon Henderson. Because he did.
That's a good question.
At the combine. Was he sub 4.4? I don't know. I would guess that he ran better than Judkins. Maybe.
Henderson ran a 4.43. Judkins, 40 time. 4.48. So they're
right,
0.05.
Yeah. I think Judkins has incredible vision. I think he's also super tough. Both of those guys. I don't like if you told me that one of those 2 ended up being a superstar back, I think I'd say it's Henderson because of the true top end speed.
Mm-hmm.
But both of them, the point that I was going to make is that both of them had to kind of set aside ego and share in carries and in the spotlight at that position. That says something about them. And Henderson I think they're both considered true high quality guys, which is what Washington's been looking for. I do like some backs though later on. Like I think Damian Martinez is probably moved up to a night 2. I think Caleb Johnson is a night 2. Who else was on my list of guys? Yeah, those are the guys. I like Jordan James from Oregon. I think he's got really, really good vision and is elusive in space. I don't know what he ran. These are guys that are night 2 and day 3 guys. They're going to get a good back in this draft. I feel confident about that. If you're on hold, stay there. We'll take a few more calls on this. I am going to give you my NBA playoff predictions at the end of the show. Who advances to the finals and who wins it all at the very end of the show. But if you're on hold, stay there. We'll do a couple of more calls. What position do you think Washington will take with its first overall pick? And which position would you like them to take with the first overall pick? Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. Don't forget, we are now streaming on the Team 980's YouTube page. Please subscribe when you get there and like the stream as well. That helps us.
All right, the Washington Commanders hosted 20 or so prospects yesterday in Ashburn, including Quincy Riley and Maxwell Hairston. They ran back the famous Topgolf trip. Dan Quinn and Adam Peters said they found it beneficial because players were a lot more relaxed and they could see and observe how players interacted with each other in social settings. The Caps defeated the Islanders by a score of 3-1. Dylan Strome accounted for all 3 goals to score his first career hat trick as Washington Capital. He dedicated the game to his late dog Wrigley, who passed away 3 years ago yesterday. The Nats got the win in Pittsburgh by a score of 3-0. Jake Irvin gets the shutout win with 7 innings pitched, 6 strikeouts, and only 3 hits. James Wood also hit this massive 445-foot bomb to right center field.
Wood, a long drive, straightaway center and deep. Forget about it. This one heading out toward the river. It is long, long gone. It bounces out of PNC Park and down toward the Allegheny River. James Wood's first career leadoff home run. 6 pitches in, the Nationals lead 1-0.
They'll continue their series tonight at 6:40 on 106.7 The Fan. With the draft just over 1 week away, Cam Ward took to the internet last night streaming Fortnite, where he opened up and named his top 4 wide receivers. Number 1, Calvin Ridley. Number 2, Jamar Chase. Number 3, Justin Jefferson. And 4, Treylon Burks. Safe to say he knows where he'll end up to start his NFL career. The NBA play-in continues to roll on. Magic got the win last night over the Hawks, 120-95. The Warriors lifted themselves over the Grizzlies, 121-116, thanks to 37 from Steph and 38 from Jimmy Butler. The Heat will take on the Bulls tonight at 7:30. The Mavs will take on the Kings at 10. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream, turn on notifications, stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
All right. Couple more calls. I'm going to give you my NBA playoff picks, my champion and I'll give you my final four before we finish up. But back to the phone lines. Chris in Damascus has been on hold. Now, you want to talk about Wizards? Is that what I just saw?
Yeah, I was going to say something. Can you hear me, Kevin?
Yeah, I got you, Chris.
I heard that if Memphis gets into the playoffs, meaning they have to win tomorrow night, that then there's a pick or a trade from the past that might get the Wizards a number one first round selection. I don't know if you want to look into that later.
Yeah, it's protected, but I think it's already set that the Wizards are going to have like either 19 or 20 in their second pick.
I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but I thought Memphis had to actually make the playoffs for it to get to be a number one for the Wizards. But anyway, and then as far as the draft goes, I'm not going to predict anything with Adam Peters. I do like the word elite. If there's somebody elite, I don't even care if they trade up, preferably trade back. I like the big guys, but you can get more picks. But, Adam Peters, this is GM time. And then whoever we get, we'll coach them up. And I'd love some game breakers, but anything that looks elite, I don't care. But defense is number one, I guess. But anyway, thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank you. Defense is number one for me, too. I just want them to improve the defense. I don't necessarily have like a great solution on how to go about it because I think there's a lot to the variability of defense year to year and the fact that some of the players they have coming back for a second year may perform at a higher level or the group in aggregate will perform better than they did last year. There is no doubt, though, that number one, in terms of last year to this upcoming year, they can't get gashed consistently week in and week out on the ground. You can't hold up like they did last year and win as many games as they did last year, giving up the kind of rushing yard totals they gave up. That I think was the exception to the rule. And the exception, of course, was the quarterback because he pretty much overcame it by himself. Greg in Reston, go ahead. Greg, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Best defensive player available in that Hairston as a Rocco group, outside of unless Luther Burden somehow slips there. Then I would go Luther Burden. I don't think they'll be able to trade down this year. I think it's going to be too difficult. Everybody wants to trade down. And then my biggest thing is out of draft weekend, I hope they figure out a way to flip Payne for a mid to late third. I just don't see the role or value of him with Kinlaw being paid, Newton already in his second year after a second-round pick. I think I'd rather have Payne get flipped, see if you can use that third for one of the backs that you mentioned, Martinez, who I loved at Oregon State and Miami, or Caleb Johnson, and have that luxury pick of a skill position player later, because I just don't see Payne's role this year. And I hope that they figure out a way to get more draft picks, but I think it's going to be harder to trade down than people think.
Great call. Although I have a weird feeling that Payne's going to be a big contributor this year. I know that I have been partial.
I know you're a Payne guy.
I know. I have been, and I've been wrong because he's not been the consistent player that I thought he would have developed into overall. But I look at Kinlaw, I look at Goldman, I look at what they have, and I'm like, Payne's still got to be a big part of their plan this year. Has to be. They tried him on the edge late in the season.
That's true. And I mean, they brought in Wise. It feels like they started to fill that lineup with a lot of, quote unquote, their players that weren't there before them.
Well, big dudes too, and Payne's big.
Fair. It's just like you said, the consistency. And I feel like I'd just rather might switch that out for a skill position luxury that you don't have right now with late first, late second, and then not wait until the fourth. So it's going to be hard to get one of those running backs that you mentioned if you don't go it in first and second.
Yeah, you may be right. I mean, we may get to the end of Friday night and see all of those really good backs gone. That's a possibility. Thanks for the call. All right, I wanted to finish up with I don't even know if I've done this every year. I think I have, probably. But I like in the West, I actually like the Clippers to beat the Nuggets and then upset the Thunder and face the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. That would be a 5 seed versus a 7 seed. I mean, the experienced teams are lower seeded teams out West. The inexperienced teams are OKC and Houston, who are the top 2 seeds. And then I see Golden State making the finals. I think the combination of Butler and Steph Curry, we are in for a ride. And Steph Curry at 37 years old is going to keep climbing the charts of greatest, players of all time. If you don't have him in your top 10 now, you might have him in your top 10 at the end of this season. Now, they would not be in this position without Jimmy Butler, clearly. But I like Golden State to emerge from the West, and I think the East is actually going to be a bit of a snoozer. I wouldn't be shocked if Detroit upsets the Knicks in the first round. But after that, I like the Celtics to go back to the NBA Finals and, get revenge for the year they lost to Golden State a few years ago and repeat as NBA champions. I've got Boston over Golden State. Do you have a quick finals prediction, Max?
Ooh, it's tough.
You're not a big NBA guy, right?
I'm not a huge NBA guy,
Yeah.
but the Thunder have just been so dominant all year. I got to pick them coming out of the West. I understand that they're young and there are a lot of teams with a lot of veterans that have playoff experience. So I could definitely see the Thunder not making it, but my prediction is going to be Thunder Celtics because Joe Mazzulla is a psychopath, and that's the team I see coming out of the East pretty easily. But the Thunder are young, they're fun. Shea is incredible. So yeah, Thunder Celtics. That's my prediction.
All right, there you go. All right, back tomorrow. Chris is next.